Welcome, everybody, on the Barricades. This is your weekly show delivered to you by the Barricade. And I am Boyan Stanislavski. As usual, with me is Maria Cernat. Hey.
Hello.
All right, so this is the last Sunday of the month where we do our thumbs up and thumbs down for the passing month. And there are some great things, or very important things at least, going on in the region of Eastern Europe, particularly in the countries where we reside, Romania and Poland. And I'd like us to talk about them and to see, to see whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down, actually. But they are particularly important from the point of view of our ideology, from the point of view of the political affiliation, that we represent, which is the left. And I want to start by saying that we've talked about that before, right, on our programs. But, what's going on in Romania right now with the working class mobilizing from different sectors quite massively, very intensely, so to say, because we're talking not only about strikes and union actions, we're also talking about wildcat strikes, which is something quite unprecedented in general, let alone in Romania. From what I gather, despite the fact that I cannot read Romanian media, but what I know from you, what I know from other collaborators of the Barricade from Romania, what we've discussed so far on our programs, this is something unprecedented, something that I can't even remember throughout my political lifetime to have ever witnessed, observed in Romania in particular, or in other countries in Eastern Europe as well. So I think it's a great. It's a very important and great phenomenon that the society is mobilizing on a class basis, and one would think that it's also a fantastic moment for the left that should be scoring lots of points every day with its message, with its interventions, with its political engagement in the movement that could be at least built on the basis of these mobilizations. So, Maria, what is it like? Is it thumbs down? Is it thumbs up? And for whom? And what is the state of affairs at the moment?
Well, let me explain how it all started. It all started when this government that is, I told you, basically formed by hardcore libertarians that think we are still living in 1985 and still think that privatization, meritocracy, individualism, and all these things that we've been herding for the past 4 decades are great and are going to be great for Romania. So these are the people that govern Romania right now. We have a coalition of the most libertarian forces that you can imagine. We have a bankster, basically. I would call him like that. And I am not the only one, because he was involved back in, I think it was 2012, in a very controversial scheme where he tried to bet against the Romanian currency, and there was a scandal. He was a CEO of a bank back then, of ING, if I'm not mistaken, and he was involved in some very shady things in the banking sector.
When was that?
The Florin Câțu is his name, and he now
Yeah, but
represents.
when was it? When were these weird financial affairs?
I think these financial things happened in 2012, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. So some time ago.
Well, he's a long-standing bankster. It's not like
Well,
he's a new.
was, but he was involved. How should I say this? So he basically was involved in this scandal, but he managed to come back, even though he was amongst the people that were not approved by the parliament. So he has. In 2008, he was involved in it is called an attack against the national currency.
So your current prime minister was actually speculating against the Romanian currency, and that was at the break of the huge crisis in 2008. And despite all this, he becomes a prime minister now.
Yes, despite the fact that back then, along with other banks, ING and Bank Post and Unicredit basically raised um, how do you say that, the percentage you take when you give a loan.
Yeah, it's interest.
Interest rates, exactly, the interest rates. I was not able to remember exactly the terms. So the scandal was around this prime minister and other people from the banking sector that actually managed to support the interests of international banksters like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Barclays, and they bet against the national currency, and they would have won if the national currency would have dropped in report
In
to the
value,
euro.
okay. Hmm.
So the national bank was able to foresee what they were planning to do, and they were able. The national bank was able to fight back and protect the national
So
currency. So
let me just get that straight. So your national bank, the National Bank of Romania, whatever the official name of that institution is, was able to fight back against the bets and the attacks of the international speculators that your current prime minister used to be aligned with back in 2008, and was able to fight back and win, right? In a way that the losses of the bets were on the part of the prime minister and his acolytes at the time. And yet, despite all this, he is the prime minister of Romania, and yeah, I don't even want to go into how is that possible because it's probably
well, it is
a long
possible
and sad story.
because, from my perspective, this whole mythology of the CEO that is a visionary and something, a very dynamic person that is the driving force of progress in Romania is very much present in the minds of Romanians, and they are willing to accept that. We haven't got to the point where you have Martin Scorsese thing like The Wolf on Wall Street, when you see banksters from another perspective. No, we are still at the point where we see these people as the dynamic forces moving Romania forward, unfortunately.
Hmm.
What is even more interesting is that 3 years after this speculation scandal taking place in 2008, that is in 2011, Florin Cârțu was actually fired by ING. So, yeah,
Yeah, but interestingly enough,
very
actually, our prime minister
interesting
is
enough.
also a bankster and also has a long-standing career in that kind of shady business. So probably it's a trend in Eastern Europe.
Well, it's a very problematic one. I just wanted to discuss about this one. And now the economy minister, that is Claudiu Năsui, comes from Union Save Romania, that is a even more libertarian right-wing force here, and his family was also involved in a very shady and very controversial scandal because his father actually took equipment from Motorola and sold it, but overpriced, to security institutions such as the Romanian army and the secret services, and unfortunately, it was a corruption case that was never solved.
Hmm.
So they are the ones that claim the rule of law and meritocracy and, everybody for himself because we live and we have to build a perfect meritocracy. These are the people
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just
but
wanted
also I just
to
want to interject here. I think it's because you brought up the question of corruption, and it's one of my four favorite, questions when it comes to Romania, Bulgaria, or Russia, for that matter. Because you see, that's this particular case that you just brought up. It was never solved, right? In terms of figuring out who stood behind this corruption and so on and so forth. And that's very characteristic because this is what corruption is for. Corruption is only bad when actually your social democrats are doing, or our social democrats are doing, or other
Yes,
forces that are somehow that are not recognized as friendly enough by, I don't know, by the West, by Washington, by the European Union, or something like that. And every time the beating of the drum of corruption starts when these forces come to power, then it's again the same thing. And where when other people are corrupt, like our current prime minister in Bulgaria, Boyko Borisov, who is just corruption 100%, he's just walking corruption, okay, or these libertarians on your end in Romania, when they get corrupt, that's fine, bankster speculating against national currency, no problem. He could become a prime minister, right? So this is just, I just wanted to
Just imagine
point out the
that,
hypocrisy.
I would like the Romanian viewers to imagine what would have happened if a social democrat would have been involved in such a speculation against the national currency. I mean, everybody would have screamed from the top of their lungs that this is impossible, that that was a crime that should have been stopped, and so on and so forth. So these are the characters, and unfortunately, they have all these ideas that somehow Reagan was able to, relay through some sort of channel directly to their brains, like the government is the problem and not the solution, like the state is the worst administrator that you can think of, that the public sector has to be shrinked as much as possible, and so on and so forth. That it is unbelievable that here in Romania, you can say these things out loud and encounter no sort of opposition, basically. Except, of course, for some journalists like Dragoș Pătraru. I think he's the only one that has an important audience that really is very sensitive to these topics. But apart from that, maybe Libertatea through some journalists, but okay, so let us go back to what happened. So they came to power, and basically it all started this winter. As I told you, and as Radu told us in our show, they should have raised the wages of personnel working in hospitals other than doctors and nurses. Why? Because back in 2017, they signed a law that they are going to raise all the wages of the medical personnel. That is everybody that works in the hospital. So back in 2017, the Social Democrats raised the salaries of the doctors and the nurses and left everybody behind in the idea that from time to time they are going to give them a raise, but that was scheduled to happen this year. And of course, this government said, we don't have money for that. And you can imagine that I want to tell a personal story. A friend of mine actually told me that her mother is now committed to COVID hospital. She's there. And basically, she told me that the doctor sees the patient for 5 minutes, and it's all on the shoulders of the people cleaning, on the people taking care of that poor old lady. To do all the things, they basically took her phone because nobody thought of that, and they started calling people that they found there to announce that, look, she's here, I am here if you want to talk to her, and things like that, So it's everything on the shoulders of that personnel that hasn't got a raise right now. That personnel is vital to the good functioning of a hospital, and nobody cares. I mean, of course, doctors and nurses are important, but they are not alone there. We have this tendency of not understanding that an organization and an institution, functions with a lot of people, and everybody is important. Now, this is how it starts.
That's not meritocratic enough, probably.
Of course. And if you're just a cleaning lady, I mean, come on, you're worth nothing, in the eyes of these people. So this was the first thing. Then the miners went on strike because they haven't got their
Can I
salary.
just make one? I want to make one clarification here. Because from what I gather, these people, the non-medical personnel, staff employed in medical facilities, they were gonna get gradual raise in pay.
Yes.
That's what they were promised some years ago when this agreement was signed or agreed upon. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the moment for their first pay rise came now, and the government said we don't have money, and that was a month ago, 2 months ago, this year, right?
That's happened in December, and they announced it on the 25th of December.
Mm-hmm.
Just on Christmas Day, they decided, how cynical. And you can imagine that they have no opposition, Boyan, because something like that, you don't do something like that if you're afraid that you're gonna get somehow, hurt by your actions.
Yeah,
But
like that there's going to be a backlash, that there's
opposition,
going to be some
if
someone's going
you
to fire back at
are
you.
not afraid that there is going to be a reaction, a backlash, then this is what you do. Then we had the miners going on strike. That happened like a few weeks ago, and it was in the western part of the country because they haven't received their salaries for about 2 months. Then we had the police officers going on strike. Then we had people from the union cartel Alpha organized a tour, basically starting from the northern part of the country and finishing in Bucharest. And now the most recent and dramatic one that actually I read that yesterday 130 miners went on hunger strike in the uranium mines in the district of Suceava, the northeastern part of our country, because they haven't been paid for the past 2 months. And today, some workers at the subway went on strike because this is a very complicated story. There was back in 2000, I think, an idea to give the union some of the commercial spaces so they can take the rent from the commercial spaces. Now the contract expired, but there was and there is still a process going on because they basically sued the subway administration for something back in 2018, and there is no conclusion from the part of the Romanian justice saying you are right, that is the ones that have the commercial spaces, or you are right, the ones that administrate right now the subway. And you have this commercial spaces where people are selling consumer goods, and they received a notification that they have to leave in 3 days, basically, with no warning. So it's a very
Leave from
complicated,
where?
but
I'm
I
sorry.
think we leave from the commercial spaces
Uh-huh.
right away, and this is a very complicated story, but I think this is an attempt to intimidate the union that basically has those commercial spaces that were given to him 20 years ago. And it is a bitter struggle between the union leaders, the union at the subway, and the administration of the subway that is now currently managed by a person that was appointed by the government and is very government friendly. So it's a very complicated situation, and I would say that I think people have reached the end of the rope because
Yeah.
Romanians are very docile from what I can tell and from what you can tell. So it is only when they reach the end of the rope that they finally decide, that something has to be done. And now from the left.
Yeah, but before we speak about the left, because I've got a couple of questions here. On the one hand, I think you're totally right to describe it as a complicated situation or cascading complications here and there. But that's on the one hand. When you look at the details of it, or when you want to nuance, when you want to look at the nuance of the situation. But on the other hand, it's plain simple. I mean, people aren't getting their money. Okay, they haven't been getting their money for the last 2 months, so they go on strike. Some of them, as you said, they went on a hunger strike even in uranium mines, which is like, wow, this is really shocking. Okay, I mean, uranium mines, and you don't pay people in uranium mines. Do you know how dangerous is the kind of work in uranium mines? It's like in the past, people used to get sent to mine uranium while they were sentenced to jail or something like that. Okay, when they were criminals, that was the kind of punishment, that you work in a uranium mine. So if there are people volunteering to actually work there, then you want to actually pay them. What kind of arrogance, what kind of audacity this is, that those people are not getting paid. And the same could be said about the attitude of your government towards the medical or non-medical workers of the medical facilities. I mean, we're in the middle of a deadly pandemic. You really want to do that kind of stuff? And it makes you want to ask the question that you kind of asked, like, what is the level of the culture of the society, and what is the level of the political misunderstanding? What is the level of the civilizational downgrade that we're in right now, when in the middle of deadly pandemic, the government, the Romanian government, libertarian as it might be, or whatever, conservative as it might be, on the Christmas Eve announces that it's actually not gonna obey by the agreement that was signed long time ago. Uh, and in such circumstances, okay, in such circumstances, there's a pandemic, there's a Christmas Eve, and we're saying no, we're not going to actually do what we promised to do, and you say that it's fine, that the public opinion in Romania says, okay, you don't have money, you
Yes,
don't.
because they are very powerful. And you know what the problem is? The Social Democrats, I think they lost because they haven't got important intellectuals on their side. Romanian intellectuals, even starting from the interwar period, but longer than that, from the Titu Maiorescu, because I talked to you about Titu Maiorescu and Sofia Nadege. Now, Titu Maiorescu lived and worked and published his most important works in the second half of the 19th century. So the Romanian intellectuals were hardcore right-wingers, okay? Extreme right-wingers. Some of the Romanian intellectuals were even very close to the right-wing extremist organization, the Legionaries here in Romania, the Iron Guard, okay? These are the Romanian intellectuals. And unfortunately, now the Social Democrats always counted on the support of the poor people and on the working class. But unfortunately, they haven't got the ability to recruit important leaders, and they haven't got the ability to recruit important intellectuals and to build a symbolic capital. And unfortunately, in Romania right now, all mainstream, or almost 90% of the mainstream intellectuals are right-wingers. They don't care. They don't care, and they cultivate this hatred towards the Social Democrats. They cultivated for years the hatred against the poor, the hatred against the old people, Can you imagine, like they call them deplorables and worse names? Even those who are ministers or secretaries of state or have higher position in the professional ladder in parties and in the administration apparatus. This is the situation,
So
unfortunately.
you have a clique of people who are intellectuals, right-wing politicians, and so on and so forth, and they basically do, what they do is they just offend and insult the majority of the Romanian population, which is poor, okay, and depends on whatever's left of the public services that you still have, and depends on the public healthcare system, regardless of the bad shape of it. And that's how they organize the internal political process. Is
Not
that
only that, let me explain. So in the first step, they defund the school, they defund the public hospitals. And in the second step, they say, we have to privatize those institutions. In the first step, you throw mud. And in the second step, you say, look, it's dirty. We have to privatize it to clean it.
yeah?
This is
Yeah.
how you do it. It's
Yeah.
it's very well known, and it's not also
It's not new.
in
You're right.
Romania. It's not something new, but in Romania it has a very, very violent form. And unfortunately, what we are seeing right now is an unprecedented attack, also on the teachers' union, because
Which is not striking yet, at least for now.
which is not striking yet, but they have these tendencies, very authoritarian tendencies directed to workers, and they have the symbolic power, because even now they say, look, and I've heard, now I'm gonna take it and discuss the part where the left is in all this political landscape. Even people from the left posted today that union leader from the subway is actually a social democrat and he should not be supported. Can you imagine that coming from
Why?
somebody? Because he is corrupt. because he's controversial, because he voted for the Social Democrats. They managed to colonize the Romanian public and to equate Social Democrats with disaster, with Satan. We have this tendency of seeing everything in black and white. And if you are a Social Democrat, then that's it. You cannot be a
Okay,
leftist. You
okay.
cannot be, what does it have to do, your political opinions, with what you do for the workers at the subway? Nobody wants to discuss that.
Or
You're a Social Democrat, then you're Satan. And I'm not
even for
saying
the left. Even
for the
for the
left.
left?
Yes, of course, because I'm not saying that the Social Democrats are angels, because
Okay, but I'm
they
saying
are
that the left should have some
responsible.
critical
They
thinking,
are
you know.
responsible for what happened. They had the power, Boyan. They had the power, and they used it to build these feudal, corrupt, networks, and to basically steal. That is the situation. We are not being naive here, but except, they are not the hardcore libertarians that we have right now. I mean, they were the ones that created some sort of feudal networks that basically stole a lot of money from the Romanian state, but they were a little milder, and they were a little more prone to give people, raises in salaries, and you had somebody to negotiate with. You wouldn't have had this situation had it been for the Social Democrats in power right now. I mean, this
Yeah,
situation,
okay, well,
and let me tell you, so the left is actually, there are people who brand themselves as leftist and say that we should not support the union.
well, whom should we support? Whom do we
Well,
support?
we should support the sexual minorities.
But they are not on strike.
No, but no, but the left in Romania, there were two major scandals that I'm aware of. Maybe there are more. The first one was a little bigger and had more impact on the public, because on the wooden walls of a church in Bucharest appeared some messages written with pink spray saying LGBT and Antifa. We don't know whether it was a right-winger that wanted to smear the LGBT, or whether it was actually an LGBT activist that wrote that. And everybody went berserk. And articles were written, and hundreds and thousands of comments. The internet just went on fire over some people spraying LGBT on the wooden walls of a church. Now, I want to, especially for the Polish public, now you had protests against the church in Poland, but they were, bottom up. I mean, they were people that were oppressed, like young girls in Poland, that protested spontaneously. Whereas here you had some activists that are pretty well connected to, funds and grants, that went spraying on the walls of a church. So it's somehow, coming from
Top
above.
down,
So
yeah.
it's top down, It's quite the opposite, if you'd ask me. That is my interpretation. But anyway, when you have miners going on hunger strike in a uranium mine, and you discuss in thousands of comments and hundreds and dozens of articles about, spraying the walls of a church, you
But that's
understand
happening
how
now? That's happening now?
alienated. Yes, it happened like last week. And you understand how alienated the whole,
Yeah. So you want to,
intelligentsia, so to speak,
yeah.
right-wingers and left-wingers are from the workers and
So
the
you want to tell me, just to sum up, just to make sure that I'm, that I get the message, okay, and that our view that we present just a very, very, very short sum up for our viewers. So in the middle of a deadly pandemic, when people are losing their businesses, their jobs, left, right, and center, in the middle of the largest working class mobilization for the last, at least, I don't know, 10 or 15 years in Romania, in the middle of all this, the left in your country, what is doing is quarreling online, where someone has written something on some wall of some church with some spray of some color, and it matters more than anything.
Yes, and because I want to be very well understood here, I'm not saying here that we should not support that, but it's a matter of emphasis and it's a matter of framing, reality.
Yeah, but
Which
look,
event it takes the spotlight here? Which event? And it tells you a lot. I'm not saying, look, you should do that, because I'm not some enlightened elite that is going to tell people what to do. That I'm just presenting the facts. And the fact is that there were like 100 more comments, likes, shares, articles, debates on spraying with pink spray the walls of a church saying LGBT or there on Antifa. I don't know. I guarantee that I think only 10% of the Romanian population even knows what Antifa is. Let me, okay?
Yeah.
So they are discussing vividly about that, and I proudly say that we at the Barricade are among the very few media organizations that actually wrote
Ignored it.
extensively. We, not who ignored it, but who discussed extensively on workers and their strike. And it is not to say that, look, workers are better than sexual minorities, because this is not a competition.
No.
But you should discuss at least both,
Yeah, but look, I want to tell you something
Now,
here.
let me tell you, because this is
Okay.
not the only scandal.
All right, sorry.
We have another one where a couple of friends, feminists, wrote an open letter to the male comrades of the left that failed to publish an article of an activist. They published the article in a journal, but they failed to publish the article in a book. And that was also another scandal. So it was
Does the Romanian left consist of 10 people, or it's...
You see, you
okay.
are fine, clever and intuitive, as usual. You basically went to exactly where the problem is, to the source of this problem. I mean, yes, we are very, very few people, I mean, the letter was signed by 50 people, and the other 50 people I published in the book or the journal or something like that. So I told you the Romanian left, you wouldn't need a very big bus to put everybody in, You would need maybe right now you would need a train, but I'm not sure. And of course, being such a small, group of people who loves to quarrel online, except for Nona Sherbănescu, whom I want to pay my respects to, because she actually drove for 16 hours and went and discussed with the miners that are striking. Apart from her, I haven't heard of somebody else, and Radu Stoichița, our comrade at the Barricade, I haven't heard of people going and discussing with the strikers and the workers and the people protesting. So this is the current situation.
Okay, but I've got a couple of questions here, because surely, I can easily imagine that some people in the labor union, in the labor movement, they could be problematic from the point of view of what they actually think about certain issues. And, that's always been a problem. It's not a new thing. And it's also, there's a very simple explanation, for this, because, the labor movement does not exist in a vacuum. Okay. It exists in the same society as everybody. So, I mean, people sometimes get, bigoted or I know have some kind of, weird ideas, okay, about certain themes that are popular among the left in particular. But yeah, okay, that I get this, and some people get confused. Some people are reluctant to invest their effort in close collaboration with that. But that's a kind of nuance that I'm prepared to accept when there's a relative class balance and when things are going as they usually go and it's business as usual. But now, when the working class is so massively on the move in Romania, you kind of you want to be a bit more flexible when it comes to politics. I mean, you want to score some points. You want to become part of a movement. You want to perhaps lead the movement. You want to create it, and then by the actions that you're going to undertake now, you can secure a leading place for yourself. I mean, not necessarily for yourself personally, but for your trend, for the political trends that you're representing, and maybe if you're able, if you turn out to be an able leader, you might just format a new movement, a new left, a new party, a new political structure that is going to be much more progressive, and is going to take time to also look at the problems that all kinds of minorities, oppressed minorities, could have in Romania and elsewhere. So I'm just thinking, why is
It,
there no
this is
perspective?
impossible. No, this is impossible right now. Maybe if there are more people, say, I was very pleasantly surprised when our comrade Grotesque came forward and started writing. If we have like 50 people like him, and I mean, oriented with the same political profile, yes, you can do something like that. But for the time being, I don't see that happening. And the people that are very radical in terms of memes and Facebook are not very radical, unfortunately, in terms of, being in solidarity with the workers and taking their sides and trying to discuss with them and making interviews and writing articles. And, we have this idea, we have to hear their voices. And
Yeah.
we don't necessarily...
Regardless of whether they believe in God or whether they like someone spraying the church.
I'm I'm so tired of this discourse that is so intolerant, basically, and so elitist. You have to
Exclusionary.
understand exclusionary, yeah. You have to understand that these people are working people. They haven't got the chance to be educated, in a very progressive environment. That Romanian education is so conservative, and we have 12 years of religion being taught in our schools. So what do you expect? I mean, you have to work with the people and the workers that you have, not the workers that you imagine.
Yeah, yeah. I like
Not
it. Well said. Well
imaginary
said.
workers. I mean, you have to
Right.
look at the real ones. And you also talked to Pat Burns about it. This is the last thing that I'm going to say. Well, look, it has to be a top-down, initiative. I think the anti-church protests in Poland are so efficient because they are bottom up, not
Yeah,
top
they're
down.
grassroots protests. You're right.
They are grassroots, so you have to have this type of protest, not to go to the workers and tell them, we have to, have a program here, an agenda, like we are liberation, the first thing, the second thing, and you have to do that. No one is going to listen to you. You have to listen to them. And
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
difficult.
That's something that the left must learn, and it's not working. It's somehow not working, and there's plenty of reasons for that. Thanks for mentioning
Thank you.
the thing that we're working on with Pat Byrne. It's like a monthly show, just so our viewers are informed as well. It's a monthly show you can find on our YouTube channel and on our website. You will find notes and as well as on our Facebook page, which is about what's wrong with the left and how to fix it. It's a very, very important, increasingly important question, I would say. And I think that, kind of referring to what we discussed with Pat on our in the previous episodes of our program, there was this conclusion, which is totally correct. I think it's very difficult to discuss it. To try to discuss otherwise, that left is definitely lacking in ideology. They just have, most people have no idea what do we want, where do we want to go, and whatever idea comes from here or from there, which sounds exciting on the surface at least. It could be queer liberation, it could be anything else. They're not bad ideas, but it's not something that is really the fundament, the backbone of the left ideology, okay? And since we've given up on the left ideology because we're kind of so confused about it, after the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of the regimes in Eastern Europe and so on and so forth, and it's been a mess. Okay, it's been a mess. So in a certain to a certain extent, I would say that this is an excuse for the people who are on the left in Romania or in other countries, but this is just that, and that's maybe, we could say that it's like 50% of the problem, but the other 50% of the problem is the way that people are approaching, okay, the notion of left activism and left understanding of reality and their role. And I think there's a lot of confusion, of course, because of the factors that I just mentioned, but also there's a huge lack of serious attitude. I mean, people seem to think that left is a kind of intellectual adventure that you can exactly share memes on Facebook or somewhere else, and then you can have this kind of satisfaction of your own superiority when you, I don't know, over meme someone or over argue someone, like in a thread of 1,000 comments about whatever issue, that all those that are on strike right now on the Barricades, okay, to use the name of our show, somewhere in the uranium mines of northeastern Romania, they just don't care, okay? I think it's great that we're that the cadres of the left in Romania, they can argue effectively on Facebook, and that we know, okay, that we know about them, as well as about the Polish left, that they can effectively argue on Facebook. That's good, but I think they've mastered it. Now they should go and do something else. The question is only whether they actually will, and I think that it's exactly lack of seriousness, it's infantilism, it's also this kind of stuck. I mean, people being totally stuck in kind of thinking that the world is them and their friends, okay, or their bubble, as it's fashionable to call it right now, like these days. And to just ignore anything that's outside the bubble. And I think it's a very dangerous process, and it's also dangerous and destructive, I think, psychologically, sociologically, if you like, because people develop all kinds of weird I don't know how to call it, cognitive conditions. I mean, they go out and they suddenly they don't know how to move around because they're not in their bubble anymore. They go to work, they go to wherever, and suddenly things they have to confront with the real world, with the real reality. And then the more you invest in this internet quarreling, internet whatever, this mess, this pathological mess, the more the less adjusted you become to the real reality, harsh as it is, pathological as it is, but there is reality, the real reality that happens. And it's not only strikes, it's even when there are no strikes, it just gets increasingly difficult for the people who are so invested in the internet to actually go out and do anything, okay, let alone join workers on the barricade. So the fact that the left is so invested in it, I think it just says that, we don't have anything else. We don't have any other leverage. We just have as some like to refer to it, the left book, okay, and the left book is there, and that's it. And of course, who benefits from that? The right wing benefits from that because they can keep, presenting themselves as though.
I want to interject here something horrible.
Sure.
Today from Romania, that Aur was there in the mine with the miners, and
Yeah,
it was heartbreaking for me.
yeah.
Heartbreaking. I mean, I think, and I'm glad that we are recording this, because I really think that if we don't change, the way we approach things, and we don't wake up and we don't do something about it, then Aur is going to be the main political beneficiary. That is, the conservative right-wingers right now are going to be the main political beneficiaries of that, unfortunately.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
should that happen, I mean, we should have another, episode of right-wing extremism in Romania like we had prior to World War II.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where it's going. I'm afraid, like at least for now, that's
But
what
tell
it
me,
looks like.
is it in Poland the same? Is it the same thing happening there?
Well, it's the same and not the same at the same time. So, well, when it comes to the left, I definitely have to say that the level, I think, the organizational level and the political level, judging by what you said, okay, judging by how you described the Romanian left, I think is a little higher because we have a social democratic party. We have two other meaningful, or maybe not meaningful, but viable at least, left-wing political organizations. The one led by Oh, sorry, the one that we discussed a lot, razem, which means together in English. Okay, and then there was one more, which the leader of which used to be the guy who was the candidate. The leader of which, yeah, exactly, the guy who was the candidate of the left wing coalition for during the presidential elections in 2019. Okay, so there were these three social democratic parties, social democratic to a different extent, okay, but they managed to form a coalition, which was something extraordinary for the Polish left. That's the first time the Polish left came together and actually did something together and achieved, the re-entering of the parliament, that re-entering in the parliament. That was really important because for some years the left has been out of the parliament totally and completely. So that was a complete plight and total mess. So they did this, and this is an achievement that I think, in comparison to Romania, that's a meaningful difference in a way that you still have some representatives in the parliament, and now another question is whether they are being held accountable in a proper manner, and whether their parties do their job, and whether the representatives, I mean the MPs, whether they do their job properly as well. But for example, when it comes to the protests of the last fall, okay, that was something very significant. And I think that the presence of the left MPs was what secured them, or what keeps securing them, the presence in the parliament, really, because that was, and you're right to say that that was a grassroots protest, a huge, massive, absolutely unprecedented when it comes to probably the modern history of Poland. Okay, since 1918, since the emergence of the new modern Polish state, that was the most massive, or next to most massive demonstration in the history, okay, of that in the modern history of that country. So, and we're talking about things that are difficult to describe in a way for the people that are listening or watching us to understand. But it was enough to step out of your staircase, okay, in Warsaw, especially if you live somewhere in the rather central parts, to just join the demonstration. You didn't have to go anywhere, look for like a crowd to join. You were just there immediately because it was so full of people. And I think that it has to do, of course, with the tiring, because let's be honest. I mean, of course, the ignition was the ban on abortions. Okay, that was introduced by this idiotic decision on the part of the Constitutional Tribunal here. But it was genuinely an anti-government protest. I think it's fair to say. And the notion, the question of abortion, it never faded away, but it was increasingly fading in the dynamics of the protest and how it developed and so on and so forth. So, people were expecting, in order to, sustain the movement would require some kind of some meaningful, viable set of postulates, okay, on abortion and against the government. How do we overcome the government? How do we overcome, the ban on abortions? And that never appeared. So this is, you see, the limits are similar, okay, in terms of quality. It's just that they appear on a slightly different level. But the MPs, they did participate in that movement. They confronted the police. They were on the demonstrations. They were repressed, like many of the people that took part in the protest. They were helping those people also, okay, that were arrested and so on and so forth. And that was very important. And I think it did make a lot of difference, because many of the people that actually took part in these demonstrations have done that for the very first time in their lives. So yeah, definitely, different situation, different circumstances, different reactions, and different position that the Polish left, the starting position that it had when the demonstrations appeared. And also, it's the case that the Polish left and even the MPs, they have a bit more of an understanding that they have to rely on the working class a little more. Okay, it's not like they have totally forgotten it, and they kind of have this understanding that it's not like they can make a choice. Okay, whereas the workers, whether they behave good or bad in a concrete and specific, on a concrete, whether they position on a concrete and specific issue is good or bad, like they kind of understand that it's not something that you can take as a starting point. Okay, so I think it's a little better. I would say. I dare say it's a little better than it is in Romania. But I think the failure still the same failure happens, only it happens a little on a higher level. Like, for example, take this. I think I already mentioned it during one of our programs that the government is, of course, trying to save its reputation. It's going to be it's going to be very difficult. I personally I'm of the opinion that it's the last Law and Justice, the Catholic Fundamentalist Party that is, that rules Poland, that's been ruling here for the last 6 years. That it's their last term, I think, but they are doing their best to save their reputation, and of course they have the problem with the ban on abortion that they finally had to introduce because they had to pay off their debts to the Catholic Church, and they haven't been doing that for the last 6 years. So finally they had to do that because they didn't want to lose their support. And then they have the pandemic, okay, to deal with, and of course they are unable to do it properly because they have no idea about management of anything, let alone a state or a state in crisis, all the more, right? So it's very difficult. It's a very difficult situation for them, and I was, I've seen I've seen them in the polls. Basically, their support going through the floor. It wasn't. I mean, things were really looking bad. So what they did is they came up with another major project. Okay, they said now we're going to have a new deal. And literally, they use like New Deal in Polish, of course. Okay, New Deal. And what's the basis of the New Deal? Of course, this is what they say. I don't know what it's going to look like. Probably it's not going to look the way they kind of present it. Mm-hmm. But they say we're going to have higher taxes for the rich, and we're not going to have taxes for the poor, or we're going to have very little taxes.
Oh, very interesting.
Right. And this is just the first thing that they revealed about it, because it wasn't yet described properly. So it's still a mystery what's going to be there. But it's part of the rebuilding of the Polish economy after the pandemic. After the pandemic's over, apparently they project it is going to be over, and they are very confident. Okay, the way they behave is kind of strange. I mean, I don't know, maybe someone trained them, but I think that they might just be investing a lot of hope in this New Deal thing. And the problem is that I just don't understand, why did we have to wait for the government to actually come up with this kind of idea? Why wouldn't the left come up with the idea of taxing the rich or eliminating some of the tax burden for the poor? This could have been done many times so far, and perhaps like some of the MPs of the left, they kind of felt like they could do something about it, but they never did, because the general atmosphere is just there's a lot of, I don't know how to say it. It's not even apathy, but it's the kind of political, ideological apathy that, there is, they can't imagine that there could be some ideological offensive on the part of the left. Okay. What they are used to is that there is attacks and one attack after another from the right, and they just have to defend the Polish women, the Polish children, the Polish workers, the Polish whatever, they have to defend them, and they are great defenders. But, if you want to win anything, you need attackers. And that's what Law and Justice understands perfectly. They've mastered it, and it's one ideological offensive after another. Most of them are kind of empty, blank. Okay. It's just a lot of talking, a lot of symbolic violence. I could even, I guess I should say, and a lot of kind of weird talking points, right? Which are extremely divisive when it comes to like who's going to defend our children against the LGBT ideology, whatever it means. Like no one knows what LGBT ideology is, or we're going to defend Poland against the European Union bureaucrats, whatever it means. Like how are the Union bureaucrats doing anything to Poland, right? In what way? Or we are going to defend. The family, as if someone's endangering the family. I mean, who's doing anything to the Polish family? I mean, I haven't seen anyone attacking, for example, Polish families on the street. I haven't seen anything like that. Although I've seen many people attacking LGBT couples, for example, on the streets. That's so it's a lot of talk, a lot of propaganda, a lot of this nonsense, right? Right-wing nonsense. But they they've been doing that since 2015, okay, and they're very good at it, and they understand that every once in a while they actually have to do something substantial. So right after they took power, they introduced this child support, 500 zloty per month to what is it, 150 euros per month per child until it reaches 18 years of age, and then now they're going to have this new deal, okay. So I'm afraid it might help them actually still hanging by a thread, but maybe sustain some kind of majority and stuff like this. I kind of hope that maybe there are going to be some more and more internal divisive processes within the party that are finally going to make it explode, because it all depends on the will and on the idea and on the imagination of one person, Yaroslav Kaczynski, who's the head of the party and one of the vice ministers.
Finally, somebody's gonna grow some spine in the, part
Maybe.
that oppose this.
Yeah, but you see, that's exactly the problem. That's exactly. I just wanted to point out that I'm not saying that I hope that the opposition is going to do anything, because I've just lost any hope. So so far, I haven't seen anything. The left or the other right wing oppositional parties doing something that is meaningful and challenging for law and justice. They just keep scratching their heads. I don't understand why. And even we had quite recently, was it a week ago or 10 days ago, when the leader of the main opposition party, the Civic Platform Party, the Donald Tusk's party, okay, who's an important bureaucrat in Brussels now, he the leader of the party was asked, okay, so some time ago, which I managed to forget by the time about it, as everyone, some time ago, you launched a slogan that you're going to be building a new social movement. You called it the New Solidarity or something. And that was, right after the presidential elections in 2019. And he said, oh, yeah, but this was just an idea. This was just emotions. We thought we were going to, they have these people they're empty of anything. They have no idea. They have no political spine. They have no ideology. They have nothing. They just don't understand how come that they are not in power anymore. They used to be there for all these years and they're not now. And they just can't figure it out. It's been 6 years and they still can't figure it out. And they still can't go to this very simple place where you have to challenge law and justice with within the framework of the policy that they're offering to the society. No, they're not able to do that. So you see, now let me just give you an example. Okay, let me just give you an example from I think it was last week. I spotted it on the internet, on the anti-social media, as I like to call them. There is this offensive I told you on the part of the right wing, ideological offensive, and sometimes it's a bit grotesque. Okay, I mean, oftentimes it's a bit grotesque, but this particular time,
over the top.
Yeah. Okay. So, but yeah, this particular time it became over the top because there is a campaign, an ongoing campaign, where all the billboards, or well, not all of them, but many billboards, a huge, vast majority of the billboards, are covered with posters that are part of an anti-abortion campaign. Okay, so there are little children, for example, there, or the fetuses. Yeah. Like, for example, there is one where there's a child in a womb or a woman, but it's a heart-shaped kind of thing. Or there are these little feet, the little feet, and it says, "I'm 11 weeks old," that kind of stuff, right? So, and it's massive, like, it's everywhere. And people started joking that if you walk with your eyes closed for like 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers and open your eyes, and if you don't see suddenly like 10 billboards like this around you, that means you've crossed the Polish border, because otherwise it's like, it's all over the place, right? And of course it's, it's disgusting. I agree with the kind of moral, assessment of the situation that many of the on the left have expressed. But it's not forbidden. I mean, in Poland we still have the kind of freedom of speech. So if someone wants to campaign against abortion, they're free to campaign against abortion. I mean, they didn't do anything illegal. They didn't present any kind of particularly damaging information or anything particularly. I would say, anything that would fall under the category of illegality. Okay, so they just said that they presented their point of view. And it turned out, because some people started looking into it, that it was some Polish millionaire, obviously close to the right wing circles, a manager of a company or a CEO of a company producing or assembling or mounting windows. Okay, that's so he sponsored that basically, and it flooded Poland. And there was a lot of hue and cry. Okay, a lot of hue and cry in the internet and in the media. You know, those that oppose the government, regardless of their profile, whether right, left, or center. And what's the response of the left? The response of the left is that they started, gathering money, okay, collecting money on one of the popular platforms here in Poland for collecting money when, I don't know, when you're in trouble or you want to start some kind of business up. They started collecting money to also put, billboards with a different message.
Of course.
And of course they were not able to collect as much money. That's number one. Second, some people started joking and remaking, okay, the kind of the billboards that are already there. For example, I don't know, when you see the little feet and saying 11 weeks old, then someone would write with a spray, right? Who asked you actually? And that kind of stuff, right? And I want to say that this is exactly the trap we're in. I mean, it's very symbolic. It's the right wing with their weird actions dictates everything that we do. Okay, let's say even that somehow we managed to get it all. We managed to collect millions of zlotys. Okay, millions of zlotys to actually do another flood with progressive messages. Okay, let's say it happens. Now, my question is, and then what? Yeah, okay, we're going to have this symbolic war, okay, for 3 months, for 6 months, for 1 year. And then what happens then? The abortions are still illegal. The neoliberal order is still here, okay, in place. The pandemic is still here. People keep losing their jobs, keep losing their businesses. Things are deteriorating day by day, hour by hour. And who cares about the billboards, really? I mean, they're ugly, they're terrible and stuff like this. But is this really something that we should be focusing on right now? And I can see the Polish left MPs writing, messages of like 10, 20 paragraphs on Facebook, how terrible, how terrified and horrified they are by this.
This is not okay, and this is exactly the trap that we should not fall into. And exactly, we should go and talk to people. Maybe they are horrified by this, and maybe we should take it up. Or not. If not, well, this is it. I want to end up here because I think it has to do with how do you relate to the public. And even I'm going to lecture a little bit on the beginnings of PR. That was this Edward Bernays that had a very powerful imagination and didn't trust the masses, actually. He thought and he wrote down that the masses and the people are stupid, okay? And they cannot be trusted with the political power, and they have to be guided from above. And that some sort of enlightened elite has to guide the public. That was his idea. Now, that was this other guy that was George Gallup, that basically started teaching about the same time Edward Bernays actually formed the first Office of Public Relations in New York. And Gallup actually thought that you should ask people, that they are rational, and you should ask them. Now, in terms of our democracy, we are still young democracies, and we still haven't managed this basic, very pragmatic American thing that you have to know who your target is. Who are you targeting with your messages? And you have to ask them what they think. You have to have research. The one thing that made, among others, American advertising and PR so powerful is research. You have to basically do research. I don't know if our political parties ever think of that, but it is a very important step in building a persuasive campaign. You have to know who is your target, what is your target, who are these people, what are their interests, what are their desires, and then you should tailor the messages according to their needs. You should also have focus groups with representatives, of these people and present them different messages, see what works and what not. You cannot say I am leftist, I know what has to be done and you have to obey. This type of authoritarian, perspective has to go. I mean, if you are in a political battle and if you want to win, you have to have you have to have convincing campaigns and messages, and this could only be done if you actually listen to the ones that you want to convince. This is the basic things that lacks here, and you should not fall, exactly as you said, into this trap. Maybe your constituency is very much appalled and maybe you will be successful by fighting back. Maybe not. You should listen what are the problems of the real working people and of your constituency, and then try to represent them. You don't represent an ideal version of the left there. You are not this enlightened elite that represents some sort of rational enlightenment in the parliament. You have to actually represent some real people with real interest that you have no clue about.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot for saying that, because I mean, first of all, really well said. Second, it just like words taken out of my mouth, because I've had exactly this sort of discussion. Okay, maybe without the referral to the focus groups and stuff like that. But I had exactly the same discussion with a friend of mine who's a very progressive LGBT person. Okay, and a left wing. Kind of self-declared, but with obvious left intuitions, and we discussed together that the main problem is, okay, of our community, okay, of left-wing people, left sympathizers, left activists, the left-wing community in Poland, as widely understood as possible, is that we get fixated on certain things which make a lot of impression on us. And, it could be the billboards now, but it could be things that are even positive. Like, for example, take the Pride parades in Warsaw, which, they're big, they're nice, they're cool. I mean, I take an issue with the, banking sector advertising itself there, but, okay, that's something else. I don't want to go into that right now. But it's an interesting event, nice event. People go there, they cheer a lot, and it's a very open-minded and open atmosphere in general, and it makes a very good impression, and it's even spectacular. Okay, particularly for people who have to endure this kind of conservative nonsense every day. Okay, in Poland, but then we have to come to the simple conclusion, okay, that it's just that. It's just one event. It could be 10,000 people there, it could be 60,000 people, it could be 5,000 people there, but it's just that. And it's just these dozen of thousands of people there. There's a whole society, okay, which has never come to this particular parade, march, demonstration, or whatever. So you only could treat that as, like, politically speaking, as a representation of something, okay? And the problem is that we are getting carried away by the representation of people who are open-minded, liberal-minded, culturally flexible, socially educated, competent, and stuff like that. And the entire society is not like this. So this is not a constituency, okay? Or this is not one constituency. Those people who are open-minded, liberal-minded, culturally flexible, and as I listed that, they are a constituency of many parties and many political organizations, many political trends, and on the most important, many political ideologies. They could be right wing, they could be left wing, they could be whatever. And we should try and think in this structural manner that, look, there is the society out there, and we want to be for that society to do something in politics, something progressive, something important, and to bring about a change. And, you can't bring about a change by just thinking that you will one day enlarge, the gay pride parade in Warsaw, and it's going to be the entire Poland is going to join the parade. And this is going to be the final say of the emancipated society, because this is not going to happen. This is like some fantasy, which is just not, it's not even political, okay? It's just some kind of I would say socio-cultural, which I mean, I wouldn't have anything against the entire Polish population joining one huge, gay pride parade. I'm just saying that it's not something that we should be looking for when we design our program, and most of all, our strategy, because that's another question which we might discuss in a different program. What is the left strategy? Okay, you don't want to go to the uranium mines in northeast Romania because the workers there support some party that you don't like, because the media don't like them or the establishment doesn't like them. Okay, you don't go there. You don't want to go to the hospitals because, I don't know, the cleaning personnel, the cleaning staff, they support whatever, or they believe in God, or they do something that doesn't fall in line with your open-minded woke ideas. Fine, you don't go there. Where do you go? What are you going to do? How are you going to be useful politically? I want to hear that. Where is your platform? Where are you going to go tomorrow? What is going to be your achievement in I don't know, this year? What are your plans?
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, the first, about a year ago, our comrade from the Barricade just wrote about the first declaration of the people protesting at the subway. And they say they don't want, of course, lowering the wages, firing the personnel, and the multinational to come and take the control of the subway. And this is very important to analyze, and I am so proud that we are there, and our colleague is streaming live right now from the scenes, from the premises where the people are protesting. So I
Yeah.
would say that, this is the conclusion. We have to be there and we have to listen to these people. This is the way to go, because otherwise we are going to get lost in very interesting, and for us is very tempting, especially for me as a graduate of philosophy. Is very tempting to get lost in this ongoing political debates, but finally we have to see some results. We have to be pragmatic about what we do. So thank you so much
Right.
for
Thanks.
talking to you.
It was a great discussion, and I think we should conclude by saying thumbs up for the working class, thumbs down for the left. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Thanks to you, and thanks to Rados Tekica, who's there, and we'll see you in 1 week time. Thanks a lot. Stay healthy and keep fighting.